Hi everyone, my name is Deepak Punia and in this video we will see the solution of this GATE question. This is a GATE 2021 set 2 question, okay. So let's see. In this question he has given a directed acyclic graph, okay. So this is a directed acyclic graph, DAG, okay. There is no cycle in this graph and every edge is directed, you can see. So in a directed acyclic graph he has given a definition, okay, a new terminology he has defined, quality score, okay. So this is a new term, okay, that he has defined in this question, okay. Now you can see he is saying that in a directed acyclic graph with source vertex S, so this vertex S, this is the source vertex, the quality score of a directed path is defined to be the product of weights of the edges of the path. Further, for a vertex V other than S, if the quality score of V is defined, the quality score of V is defined to be the maximum among the quality scores of all the paths from S to V. The quality score of S is assumed to be 1. So now he is asking the summation of quality score of all the vertices in this graph. So this is a very easy question, okay, you can see. First we will try to understand what is the definition of quality score of a directed path, okay. So let's see. So what we will, let's see, okay. Now if you have a directed path, let's assume vertex A, okay, and from this vertex A, let's assume you have a directed path. For example, maybe this is this edge has weight 1. Let's assume vertex B, and let's assume vertex C, okay, and let's assume you have another path, okay. So vertex, you can see vertex D, and then vertex C. Let's assume this edge weight is 3, and let's assume this edge weight is 5. Now in this, okay, just to explain what is the definition of this quality score, I have taken this graph, okay. In this graph you can see that if I want to find out, let's assume that this is the source vertex, let's assume, okay, this is the source vertex, and I want to find out the quality score of a path, okay. Now consider this path from A to C, okay. So you consider this path. Now from A, what I am doing, I am going to B, and then from B I am going to C. Now you consider this path. So from A to B to C, you can see from A to C, this is the path. Now he is saying that the quality score of a directed path, this is your directed path, and the quality score of this path, that is multiplication, product of all the edge weights. So what is the quality score of this path? I can say that the quality score of, let's call it path P, okay. Then the quality score of path P, that will be equal to product of these edge weights, okay. So that will be basically 3. So you can see quality score of this path, that is 3. So this is the definition he has given. The definition is basically, if you have a directed path, okay, from source vertex to any other vertex, then the quality score of that path, that will be product of edge weights, okay. So quality score of this path is 3. Now here one more point you can see. If you see from this source vertex to this vertex C, you can see there are two paths, okay. Either you can go from A to B to C, or you can go from A to D to C, okay. So there is another path that is possible. Let me call it path Q, okay. So the path Q is like this. From A I can go to D, okay, and from D I can go to C. Now so from A to D you can see the edge weight. So let's assume that the edge weight is, let's assume that edge weight is 2, okay. So from A to D the edge weight is 2, and from D to C the edge weight is 5. So for this path Q, if you find out quality score of this path Q, then what that will be, okay. So you can see this is the path Q from A to D and from D to C. For this path the quality score will be product of edge weights. So product of basically 2 multiplied by 5. So the quality score of Q, that will be 2 multiplied by 5, and that is 10, okay. Now you can notice one thing, that so this is the definition of quality score of a directed path. So we have seen what is the definition of quality score of a directed path. Now what is the definition of quality score of a vertex? Okay, now if you want to find out quality score of this vertex C, then what that is basically, you can see that from source vertex to vertex C there are two paths possible. Okay, one path is P and another path is Q. Okay, so this is one path P and this is another path Q. Now the quality score of path P is 3, the quality score of path Q, that is 10. So the maximum, you can see there are two paths possible and the maximum quality score is basically this 10. Okay, if you take this path, then you will get maximum quality score. So that's why quality score of C will be 10. Okay, so this is how they have defined the quality score term. Okay, so they have given a new term, quality score, and this is the definition they have given. Okay, so you can find out the quality score of a vertex very easily. All you need to do, you just need to check, okay, how many paths are there from source vertex to this vertex C. Okay, and all those paths, you can find the quality score of all those paths. Okay, for example, here there are only two paths from source vertex to vertex C, and the quality score of these two paths are 3, 10, and you just take the maximum. Okay, so the maximum is 10, you can see. So that's why the quality score of vertex C, that will be 10. Okay, now here one thing you can notice. Okay, so let's see, first we will see the graph, and then we will, okay, you can see. Okay, in this graph there are a lot of vertices we have in this graph. Okay, so now for this graph we will try to find out the quality score. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so this is our graph. Now let's see. From vertex S, you can see there is only one path to vertex C. Okay, you can see there is only one path, because remember this is a directed acyclic graph. Okay, and hence you can see there is only one incoming edge to vertex C. Okay, that is from S to C. There is only one incoming edge. So from S to C there is only one path, that is this S. You can see this directed edge. Okay, so the quality score of C, that will be 1. I can say that quality score of C, that will be 1, because there is only one edge. Okay, so the quality score will be directly 1. Now if you see in this vertex A, there is only one incoming edge. Okay, again you can see, so there is only one path from S to A, and that has weight 9. Okay, so the quality score of vertex A, that will be 9. Now let's see the quality score. So we have found quality score of C, we have found quality score of A. Now let's find out quality score of D. Okay, so when you find out quality score of D, you don't have to check from S. Okay, you don't have to go from S. What you can do, remember, see, in this vertex D there are two incoming edges. Okay, so you can see for this vertex D, if you see, there are two incoming edges. One incoming edge is from C and another incoming edge is from A. So either you can go from C to D or you can go from A to D. Okay, so that's why the quality score, if you want to find out the quality score of A, we already know, the quality score of C we already know. Now either you can take this additional edge from C to D or you can take this additional edge A to D. One of these you can take, whichever will give you maximum, that we can take. Okay, so what I want to say, let's see. What I want to say is this: let's assume that this is your source vertex. Okay, and let's assume this is some vertex. Okay, so from source vertex, let's assume this is some vertex A. Similarly, from source vertex, let's assume this is some vertex B. Now let's assume you already know the quality score of A. Let's assume that is alpha, and you already know the quality score of B. Let's assume that is beta. Now let's assume there is edge from A to C. Okay, and let's assume there is edge from A to B to C. Let's assume this edge has weight, let's assume M, and this edge has weight N. Okay, so when we have this type of scenario, then see, when you find out the quality score of C, you don't have to find out all the path from source vertex to C. You don't have to do that. Why? Because you can save some you can save some time. Why you can save? Because you can see the quality score of A you already know, the quality score of B you already know, okay. Then what will be, if you see any path, let's assume these are the only incoming edges into C, there is no other incoming edge, let's assume, okay, there is no other incoming edge. Then if you want to go from S to C, then either you have to go through A or you have to go through B, okay. If you go through A, then you can see we already know the quality score of A, okay, and this is basically the best score that we can get from S to A, and we already know the quality score of B, so this is the best score that we can get from S to B. So we already know this alpha, we already know this beta and this m comma n. Then what we need to do, the quality score of C, what that will be, the quality score of C basically will be whichever is the maximum. Basically I want to find out the maximum of these two. What two? Either I can go from S to C, either I can go through this vertex A or I can go through this vertex B. If I go from vertex A, then what will be the quality score of C? That will be quality score of A multiplied by m, okay. So that will basically alpha multiplied by m. Or if I go from S to C, if I go through this B, then the quality score of C, that will be basically quality score of B multiplied by this n, okay. So that will be beta multiplied by n. So this is what I need to find out, okay. I hope you got the point. What I am trying to say, I am saying that if you have a big graph, okay, let's assume there is a very huge graph you have, okay, let's assume there are 20-30 vertices, okay. Now in that case, what you can do, in that case, if you already know this situation, if you already know the quality score of A, you already know the quality score of B, and let's assume these are the edges, okay, these are the edges, this is edge from A to C, this is edge from B to C. Now let's assume that in this C there is no other incoming edge. What it means? It means that if you want to go from S to C, then either you have to go through A or you have to go through B, okay. Now if I go through A, let's assume if I go through A, remember this is a directed acyclic graph, okay. So if I go through A, then what will be the quality score that I will get, okay, if I choose this path, okay, if I go through from S to C, if I go through A, then what is the quality score that I will get? That will be alpha multiplied by m, because remember this alpha is already the best score that we can get for A, okay. So that's the reason this is already a maximum value, okay. This alpha, this is already the maximum value on all the possible path from S to A, okay. From S to A there can be many paths possible, okay, and this alpha is the maximum value, okay. So that's the reason I can say from S to C, if I take this path through A, then the quality score that I will get will be alpha multiplied by m, okay. And if I take this path from S to C, if I take this path through vertex B, then the quality score that I will get will be beta multiplied by n, okay. So finally the quality score of C will be maximum of these two values, okay. So this is the logic behind this question, okay. Now let's see here. You already know the quality score of A, you already know the quality score of C. You can see that the quality score of D, what that will be? Quality score of D will be basically maximum of, okay, maximum of, either you can go from A to D or you can go from C to D. If you go from A to D, then you can see quality score of A is already 9 multiplied by, and this path you can see this edge weight, that is 1, okay, comma. Or maybe you can go from C to D. If you go from C to D, then quality score of C is 1 and this edge weight is also 1. So finally what you will get? You will get maximum of these two, that will be 9. So this is the quality score of D, okay. Now after this, let's find out quality score of F, okay. So quality score of F, that will be, you can see there is only one incoming edge in this F, and that is through C, okay. So this is the only incoming edge that we have, and we already know the quality score of C. So quality score of F, that will be quality score of C multiplied by CF edge, okay. So that will be quality score of C, that is 1 multiplied by what is this edge weight? That is 9. So that's why you can see that will be 9. Okay. Now quality score of, let's see the next vertex. Let's find out quality score of B. Okay. So what will be the quality score of B? That will be, again you can see that this, there is only one incoming edge in this B, and that is from A to B, that is edge weight 1. Okay. So what will be quality score of B? That will be quality score of A multiplied by 1. Okay. So you can see quality score of A, you can see that is 9. 9 multiplied by 1, that is 9. So we know the quality score of B. Let's see the quality score of, what will be the quality score of E? Okay. So if you want to find out quality score of E, then what that will be? That will be maximum of, okay, in this E you can see there are two incoming edges. Okay, one is from D, another is from B. Okay, so the quality score of D we already know, that is 9. Okay, so if you go from D to, basically if you take this path, okay, from D to E, then the quality score, or then the score that we will get, that will be basically quality score of D multiplied by 9. Okay, so that will be 9 multiplied by 9. Or if you take from B to E, if you take this path, okay, so from source vertex you want to go to vertex E, but if you take this path through B, then what will be the quality, what will be the score that you will get? The score that I will get will be quality score of B multiplied by 1. Okay, so quality score of B I already know, that is 9 multiplied by 1. So what is the maximum value? That is 81. Okay, next quality score of, now I will find the quality score of G. So what is quality score of G? Remember quality score of G. Remember in the in this vertex G there are two incoming edges. One is from F, another is from D. Okay, so the answer will be basically quality score of G, that will be maximum of, okay, either you can go from F to G, then quality score of F multiplied by 1. What is quality score of F? That is 9. 9 multiplied by 1. Or you can go from D to G. So the quality score of D, that is 9, and quality score of and this edge weight, that is 9. So that is 9. Okay, so that you will again get 81. Now, so now we will find out. Okay, so what is remaining? You can see quality score of T. Let's see quality score of T. In this vertex T, you can notice that there are two incoming edges. Okay, one is from G, another is from E. So this will be basically maximum of quality score of G multiplied by 1. What is quality score of G? That is 81 multiplied by 1, comma, quality score of E multiplied by 9. What is quality score of E? That is 81. 81 multiplied by 9. Okay, so you can see this. So this will give you basically 81 multiplied by 9. Okay, this is the quality score of T. So we have found quality score of all the vertices. Okay, see what we have done in this question. In this question he has given a new definition, that is called quality score. So first we have seen what is quality score of a directed path. Now quality score of a directed path is basically product of all the edge weights. Then we have seen what is the quality score of a vertex. Quality score of a vertex. If you have a vertex, okay, from source to that vertex, if you have many paths, okay, every path has a quality score. Now the maximum of these quality score, that will be the quality score of vertex. So these two definitions we have seen. After that we have made an important observation. This is the important observation actually. Okay, in this observation you can notice that if I have a vertex from if I have a vertex C and I want to go from source vertex to C, okay, and let's assume these are the only incoming edges, then this is how we can find quality score of this vertex. Okay, so this formula we understood. Now after understanding this formula, what we can do, we can find out quality score of all the vertices very easily. Okay, so this is how for all the vertices we have found quality score. Now some of you might be wondering that this is an easy graph, okay, we don't have to do this much effort. Yes, of course, we don't have to do this much effort. We can just you can see, we can just simply see all the path. Okay, we can enumerate all the path. For example, from S to T, I can enumerate all the path manually. Okay, and then I can find the quality score of all these paths, and then I can find the maximum. So that I can do. But the point is that this is a nice observation, and in the exam, okay, maybe in the exam, if they give you a very huge graph, okay, this is only you can see 9 vertices. If they give you 20 vertices, 30 vertices, then you can very easily solve this type of question using this formula, using this method. Okay, so this formula that we got, this is an important formula. Okay, now, so these are the quality score of all the vertices. Now he is asking the summation of all these values. All we need to do is just do the summation of all these values. So what will be the answer? You can see the summation will be like this. So the answer that he is asking, that will be quality score of C plus quality score of A plus quality score of D, that is 9, plus quality score of F, that is 9, plus, okay, plus quality score of B, that is 9, and quality score of E, that is 81, plus quality score of G, that is 81, and plus quality score of T, that is basically 7 to 9. Okay. Now, if you add all these values, then what you will get? If you add all these values, then basically the answer that you will get will be 9 to 9. You can add them and the answer will be 9 to 9. Okay. So you can add all these values, you can see. Okay. So this is the answer. Okay. In this video, we will see the solution of this question. Okay. This is a GATE 2021 set 2 question. Let's see. Let S be a set consisting of 10 elements, the number of tuples of the form A, B such that A and B are subset of S and A is a subset of B is. Okay. So let's try to understand this question, what he is saying. He is saying that you have a set S and he want to ask you how many this type of pairs you can make. Okay, A, B. How many this type of pairs? Remember, this is an ordered pair, so the order will matter. Okay, because what I want to say is that this 2, 3, this is not same as 3, 2, because this is an ordered pair, so the order will matter. Here the first element is 2, second element is 3. Here the first element is 3, the second element is 2. Okay, so he is asking that how many such ordered pairs, how many such tuples we can make. And what is the condition? The condition is that A and B, they should be subset of S. Okay, so A is a subset of S, B is a subset of S, but the additional condition is that A should be subset of B. Okay, so this A, this first element A, this should be subset of this second element B. Okay, so this is the meaning of the question. Now let's solve this question. We can solve this question by 2 different methods. Okay, we will see both the methods, we will see. Okay, so let's see method 1. This method 1 is a little bit lengthy method, we will see, but after that we will see a very short method. Okay, so let's see the method 1. Now in this method 1, basically what we want to do, we want to use the concept of power set. So you already know that if you have a set S, let's assume we have a set S, okay, such that the cardinality of this set S, that is, let's assume N, then what will be the cardinality of power set of S? So power set of S, what is power set of S? That is set of all subsets of S. Okay, so this PS, this is basically your power set. Okay, so we know what is the definition of power set. So let me write down power set of S, that is basically set of all subsets of S. I can say that this is power set of S. I am denoting like this, power set of S. Okay, what is this? This is equal to all the this is set of all the subsets of S. So for example, I can say P such that P is a subset of S. This is your definition of power set. Now if we have a set S such that set S has cardinality N, then what will be the cardinality of power set? That is a standard result, that is 2 power n. Okay, so basically there will be 2 power n possible subsets. Okay, so hence the cardinality of power set will be 2 power n. So this is a concept that we know. Now the next concept that we need to see is, let's see, let's assume that you have, there is a, let's assume, so no, let's assume that you have a set S, okay, and in this set S, let's assume there are some n elements, A1, A2, A3 and so on, total An. So let's assume there is a set S, there are n elements in this set S. Now I want to ask you that I am making pair A comma B, okay, such that A and B both are subset of S and A is a subset of B. Basically I can say A comma B, they both are subset of S and also A is a subset of B. A must be subset of B. This type of pair I want to create, okay. And now consider, let's assume that my A is this. I am taking A, A1, A2 and so on, AK. So basically I have taken the K elements from A1 to AK. These K elements I have taken. Let's assume this is my A, okay. This is my set A. Now if this is my set A, then how many possible choices I have for B? That is the question, okay. What I want to ask, this is the set S that is given. I want to create this type of pair A comma B, this type of pair I want to create such that A and B both are subset of S and A is subset of B, okay. So this type of pairs I want to create. Let's assume that a scenario I am giving to you. Let's assume that my set A is this A1 to AK. This is my set A, okay. So from A1 to AK, K elements I have taken. Now how many choices I have for B? So that is the question. So how many choices I have for B, okay. You can notice that this A is a subset of S, okay. So this condition is satisfied, A is a subset of S. B should also be subset of S, but remember B should be superset of A. This B, this should be superset of A. What it means? It means that every element that we have in A, that element we must also have in B, okay. So if you have, for example, A1, you have this element A1, this is in A, so this element A1 should also be in B, okay. So in this B, you should definitely have A1, you should definitely have A2, because remember B should be superset of A, okay. So all the elements of set A, they must also be element of set B. So these K elements should definitely be present in this set B, okay. But apart from these K elements, okay, apart from these K elements, there are remaining n minus K elements are remaining, you can see, okay, because in the set S we have total n elements, okay. So apart from these K elements, the remaining number of elements are n minus K, okay. Now for those n minus K elements we have choice, okay. For those n minus K elements, for example, what are those elements? Those elements are basically A K plus 1, okay, A K plus 2 and so on, okay, A n. So these are those elements, and for each of these elements we have choice. Either we can take it or we do not take it in B, okay. In set B, either we can take it or we do not take it. Either we can take it or we do not take it. So for each of these elements we have two choices. For this element I have two choices, for this element I have two choices, and for this element also I have two choices, okay. For each element I have two choices, okay. So that's why you can see that apart from these K elements, I can take any of these elements I can take, okay. Or basically I can take these elements or I do not take these elements. So for every element I have two choices. So how many choices I have for B? That will be 2 power n minus K. Because remember what I am saying that once you fix this set A, once I fix this set A, then all these elements must be present in set B. All these elements, all these K elements must be present in set B. But these additional elements, okay, these elements which are not in A, okay, these elements may or may not be present in this set B. Okay, so for each of these elements we have two choices. Either we can take these elements in B, or we do not take these elements in B. So for each element we have two choices. So total how many choices I have for B? That is 2 power n minus k, because there are n minus k elements. Okay, you can see these are basically n minus k elements. So that's why 2 power n minus k, these many choices I have for B. Okay, so if you understood this concept, now we are going to apply this concept. Okay, so remember this, basically you can think of it as a lemma, you can think of it as an intermediate result, that once I fix A, okay, and if I put k elements in A, then there are 2 power n minus k, these many choices I have for set B. Okay, now let's come to our question, let's come back to our question. Let's see. So in our question he is saying that you have a set S whose cardinality is 10. Okay, and he want to create A comma B, this type of elements he want to create, this type of tuples he want to create. Okay, so how can we solve it? Very easily we can solve it. See, let's see this A. Okay, either I can take this A as a, I can take cardinality of A equal to 0. Okay, of course, because cardinality of A equal to 0 means basically A is empty set. Okay, if I take A to be empty set, means if I take cardinality of A equal to 0, then how many choices I have for set B? You can see for set B how many choices I have, that is 2 power 10. Okay, we have seen this intermediate result, I am just using it. Okay, similarly if you put one element in set A, okay, you can see if you put exactly one element in set A, if set A has cardinality 1, okay, if you put one element here, then how many choices I have for B? That will be 2 power n minus k, n is 10 and k is 1, so that's why 2 power 9, you can see. Okay, these many choices I have for B. Similarly, if you put two elements in set A, then how many choices I have for B? That will be 2 power 8, and so on. Okay, if I put all the 10 elements, if I put in set A, all the 10 elements I put in set A, then how many choices I have for B? That will be 2 power 0. Okay, so this, okay, so I hope that you got it. Basically we have used our previous result. Okay, if you put k elements in set A, then there are 2 power n minus k, these many choices for set B. Okay, now you can see that, so he want to count this type of pair A comma B, this type of pair he want to count. Then what we can do, see how, okay, set A has cardinality 0. When set A has cardinality 0, then there are 2 power 10 choices for B. Okay, so when set A has cardinality 0, it means set A is empty set. So there is only one, you can say there is only one possibility for A is empty set. Okay, so in that case we have 10 to the power 10. Okay, these many choices of B, plus when set A has cardinality 1. Okay, so how many such one cardinality set we can have? Okay, how many such set A we can have? Set A has cardinality 1, means one element we are putting in set A. Okay, so how many such set A I can make? I can take, out of these 10 elements I can take any one element. Okay, out of these 10 elements I can take any one element, and that element I will put in the set A, because you can see here set A has cardinality 1. So how many such set A I can create? I can create 10 such set A. Okay, 10 such set A I can create. Okay, and for each set A, okay, for each set A I have 2 power 9 choices for B, because you can see once I fix set A, then I have 2 power 9 choices for set B. Okay, so you can see these 10 C1, this is basically these many set A are possible of cardinality 1, and for each such set A 2 power 9, this is my, this many number of ways I have. Okay, Similarly, you can see here, when set A has cardinality 2, then for B we have 2 power 8 choices. So set A has cardinality 2. How many such set A I can create? I can create 10C2. I can create 10C2 such set A, okay? And for each set A, once I fix a set A, then 2 power 8 choices I have. 2 power 8 choices I have for set B, okay? So like this if I continue, then what I will get? I will get 10C10 multiplied by 2 power 0. So this is what I will get. Now this is your, if you see, this is basically your binomial theorem, okay? This is a binomial theorem. Let me write it. What is a binomial theorem? Let me write it. You can see binomial theorem, if you want to write, then binomial theorem is like this. So binomial theorem is like this: a plus b power n, where n is a positive integer. A plus b power n, what is this? This is basically nc0 a power 0 b power n plus nc1 a power 1 b power n minus 1 plus nc2 a power 2 b power n minus 2, okay, and so on ncn a power n b power 0. This is the binomial theorem that we have, okay? So this binomial theorem we can apply and we can see that what we will get. So this is, here we can apply the binomial theorem. So what we will get? This is, here you can see, this is 1 plus 2 power 10. Basically this is the expansion of 1 plus 2 power 10. If you expand this 1 plus 2 power 10, then you will get this, you can see, because from 10C0 we are going to 10C10. You can see here I can put 10C0 because 10C0 is equal to 1. 10C0 is equal to 1. So I can put 10C0 here. From 10C0 I am going to 10C10. So the value of n is equal to 10. Okay, and you can see 2 power 10, 2 power 9. So so the value of, basically the value of B is 2 and the value of A is 1. Okay, so that's how you can see, and this is your 3 power 10. So this is the answer. Okay, so this is one method to solve this question. Okay, this is a, I know that this is a quite lengthy method. Okay, but now we will see a method 2. A method number 2 we will see to solve this same question. Okay, so this same question we will solve by method number 2. So let's see. What is method 2? You have a set S. Okay, so let me give you method 2. Okay, so method 2. This is a very short method and this is a very nice method. So actually I just wanted to tell you both the methods. Okay, method 1, method 2. There are 2 ways to solve this question. We have already seen one way. Now we will see another way. Okay, and the first method, that was quite, you can see, quite time consuming method. Okay, but this method is very easy and this method is very useful. Okay, using this method we can solve many similar type of questions within, you can say, within few seconds. You will see. So what is method 2? You have a set S and the cardinality of set S is basically 10, and you want to create set A comma B such that A should be subset of B. Okay, here A and B both are subset of S, but A is subset of B. So let's assume that the set S, this set S has cardinality 10. Let's assume these are the elements A1, A2 and so on A10. Let's assume these are the elements in set S. Okay, now so he is saying that this A should be subset of B. A and B are subset of S and A should be subset of B. So for each element, if you see, for each element how many choices I have. Okay, let's look at each element. Let's look at this element A1. For this element A1, how many choices I have? See, so for A1, for this element A1, how many choices I have? See, either I can put this A1 in A also, in B also. So basically I am putting A1 in A also, B also. 1 1 means this A1 is present in A and also this A1 is element of B also. So you can see when I put A1 in A also, B also, then this condition is satisfied. Okay, A is subset of B, because A is subset of B means every element of A is also element of B. You can see here, you can see this A1, this is present in A also, this is present in B also. So you can say this condition is satisfied. So for this A1, this is one possible choice. What is another possible choice? You can see what I can do. I do not put this A1 in A and I put this A1 in B. Basically, this element A1, this does not belong to A, but it belongs to B. You can see in this situation also this condition is satisfied. Okay, you can see A is subset of B, because you can see this element A1, this is not present in A, but yes, this can be present in B. Okay, so that's why in this case also this condition is satisfied. Next, what is the possibility? What I do not put this element A1 in A comma B. I do not put it. Basically, this A1, this is not present in A, this is not present in B. In this situation also, this condition is satisfied. You can see, because A is subset of B. This element A1, this is not present in A, this is not present in B. In this situation also, this condition is satisfied. What is another possibility? What I do, I put this element A1 in A, I do not put it in B. This case is not possible. Why? Because in this situation, this condition is not satisfied. You can see, in this situation what I am saying that this element A1, this is present in A, but this element A1 does not belong to B. In this situation, this condition is violated, because this condition says that A is subset of B. What it means? It means every element of A must be element of B. But you can see here, this A1 is element of A, but this A1 is not element of B. So this case is not possible. So you can see only these three cases are possible. Only these three choices. So for element A1, I have three choices. Similarly, for every element you have three choices only. Whatever element you take, if you take A2, if you take A3, if you take A10, whatever element you take, you have three choices only. Either that element, whatever element, okay, A1, A2, A3, whatever element you take. For each element, we only have three choices. Either we can put that element in both the set, or we can put that element in set B but not in set A, or we do not put that element in any of these set. So only these three choices I have for each element. Okay, so for each element I have three choices. For each element I have three choices. For each element I have three choices. Okay, so because for each element I have three choices and there are 10 elements, so how many this type of pairs I can make? That will be 3 power 10, because I can apply the product rule here. You can see for A1 I have three choices, for A2 I have three choices, and so on. For A10 also I have three choices. For each element I have three choices. So how many this type of A comma B, this type of pairs I can make? That will be 3 power 10. So this is the method 2. Okay, you can see this is a very easy method. Okay, this is a very easy method, and also this is very useful method also. Why this is useful? Let me show you. Okay, so we can create some variations. So let me create some variations of this question. For the same question, let me create some variation. Let's assume that he is asking you, you have a set S whose cardinality is 10, and then he is asking A, B, C. This type of triples you need to create. This type of triples you need to create. Okay, such that let's assume A is subset of B and B is subset of C. Okay, now let's solve this question. You can see this is a variation of that question. You can see this is a variation. Set S has 10 elements. Now we want to create this type of triples. Okay, this type of triples I want to create. This type of triple where A, B, C, these are subset of S, and A is subset of B, B is subset of C. this type of triples I want to create. So how many such triples I can create? Let's see it. Okay, so you have, let's assume the set S has 10 elements, A1, A2 and so on A10. So for each element, how many choices I have? Okay, so if you take, for example, let's see for A1 how many ways I have. Let me see. Okay, for so for element A1, you can take any element. Okay, either you can take A1 or you can take A2. For any element, how many choices we have? So remember, I want to create A, comma B, comma C, such that A should be subset of B, B should be subset of C. Okay. Now, for A1, how many choices I have? Either, so you can see, I do not put A1 in any, you can say any set. So yes, in this situation, this condition is satisfied. Okay, because you can see this element A1, this is not present in any of these set A, comma B, comma C. So this condition is satisfied. Okay, what I can do, let's assume I put this element A1 in set B, in set C. Then you can see what I can do. I can do this. So this element A1, this belongs to set C, but this does not belong to set A, comma B. So this is also, in this situation also, this condition is satisfied. Okay, what I can do, I can do this also. I can do this also. Okay, you can see in this situation also, you can see this condition is satisfied. Okay, now I can do this also. In this situation also, this condition is satisfied. Okay, now let's see. I can do, can I do this? Can I do this? Okay, see, I cannot do this. Why? Because in this, what is happening? This element A1, this belongs to B, but this does not belong to C. Element A1, this belongs to B, but it does not belong to C. So this condition is violated. This condition is saying that every element of B must be element of C. But in this situation, this condition is violated. Okay. Now let's see what other choices. For example, can I do this? Again, I cannot do this, because in this situation, what I am saying that element A1 belongs to A, but it does not belong to B. So this condition is violated. Okay, so you can notice that all the cases that I will create, for example, if I create 101, this is also not possible. Okay, for example, if I create 110, that is also not possible. Okay, so you can see, okay, 1 2 3 4, so you can see 2 2 4, yes. So this is how you can see only 4 choices I have. For each element I have 4 choices. So for each element I have 4 choices, and hence I can say total how many elements I have? Total 10 elements, and for each element I have 4 choices, 4 choices, 4 choices. So total how many this type of triples I can create? That will be 4 power 10. Okay, so the answer will be 4 power 10. Okay, I can say 4 power 10. So this will be the answer. So this is how you can solve this type of variations and this type of questions. Okay, so for this question we have seen 2 methods. Okay, one method was, you can say, time consuming, tedious method. Okay, but I just wanted to tell you that same question can be solved by many different methods. Okay, and this method is very useful. Okay, this method you can see. Okay, because using this method we can create so many variations. Okay, they can ask you any variation, they can ask you, maybe for example, here I am asking you how many triples we can create. They can ask you more variations also. For example, maybe A is subset of B, but B is superset of C. So this type of variations also can ask you. For example, another possible variation, you can try this. Another possible variation that you can try is this type of variation: A, B, C, such that A is subset of B and B is a superset of C. Okay, so this type of variations also you can. B is superset of C. So this type, many different variations you can try, and you can try to solve using this method. Okay. Okay. In this video, we will solve this question. This is a GATE 2021 set 2 discrete mathematics question. Consider the following sets. Okay, set 1, set 2, 2 set they have given us. where n is greater than equal to 2. Set S1, this is set of all n by n matrices with entries from set A, B, C, and set 2, set of all functions from the set to set 0, 1, 0. Okay, so which of the following is correct? So he is asking for surjection, bijection, and all these things. So let's see how to solve it. So first, before we see this question, let me tell you some you can say some points about functions. If you have a function, for example, let's assume you have a function from set A to set B. This is set A, and let's assume this is set B. If you have a function from set A to set B, then from this set A to set B, let's assume this set A has cardinality M and this set B has cardinality N, then injective function is possible. When will be injective function possible? So injective function, you know what is an injective function? Injective function, or you can call it one-one function. Okay, so one-to-one function exists. Okay, one-to-one function exists if and only if. Okay, so from set A to set B, injective function, or you can say one-to-one function, that will be possible if and only if you can say m is less than equal to n. So when number of elements in this set A that is less than equal to the number of elements in this set B, okay, then we can say injective function or one-to-one function will be possible. So injective function, one-to-one function exists if and only if m is less than equal to n. Similarly, surjective function. Okay, so surjective function, or you can call it onto function. Onto function exists if and only if you can say that m is greater than or equal to n. Okay, so you can see when m is greater than equal to means the number of elements in this set A that must be greater than or equal to number of elements in this set B. In this situation, surjective or onto function will be possible. Surjective or onto function exist, remember existence. Okay, so surjective or onto function from set A to set B will be possible if and only if m is greater than equal to n. Similarly, the last point is bijective function. Bijective function. This bijective function, this is also called one-to-one correspondence. Okay, so this is also called one-to-one correspondence. Okay, so this bijective function, one-to-one correspondence, that will be possible if and only if, okay, bijective function is possible if and only if m is exactly equal to n. So these two things, these 2 points we have. Okay, you can see injective function is possible if and only if the domain cardinality, okay, this set A, this is the domain, and this set B, this is the codomain. So the domain cardinality must be less than equal to codomain cardinality. Surjective function is possible if and only if domain cardinality is greater than equal to codomain cardinality. And bijective function is possible if and only if you can see domain cardinality is equal to codomain cardinality. Okay, so these 3 points we are going to use in this question. Okay, now let's see. In this question he is saying set S1 is given to you. Now set S1 is saying that set of all n by n matrices with entries from set A, B, C. So you are creating, okay, matrices. So let's see. Okay, now so let's see how many n by n matrices you can create. So you want to create n by n matrices, okay, such that each element is coming from set, each element that is coming from set A, B, C, means each element is either A or B or C. Okay, so how many such n by n matrices you can create? So the number of, so what will be the answer? You can see in this n by n matrix, total there are n square elements. You have total n square elements in this matrix, you can see. Okay, total n square elements you have, and for each element you have 3 choices, because each element either can be A or it can be B or it can be C. So each element has 3 choices. Okay, and total how many elements we have? N square elements. So how many such matrices we can create using product rule? Okay, because for each element we have 3 choices and total n square elements we have. So total number of matrices that we can create, that will be 3 power n square. Okay, so this will be the number of n by n matrices such that each element is, you can say, either A or B or C. Okay, this type of matrices, how many matrices we can create? That will be 3 power n square, because every element has 3 choices and total we have n square elements. Okay, so this is the, you can say, cardinality of set S1. I can say this is the cardinality of set S1. Okay, now let's see set S2. What is set S2? You can see here, set S2 is set of all functions from set 0, 1, n square minus 1 to the set 0, 1, 2. Okay, now let's see. So before we see this, let me tell you one point, that if you have a function, let's assume you have a let's assume you have two set A comma B, then how many functions we can define from set A to set B? Let's assume these are m elements and here we have n elements. Okay, so if we have two set A comma B such that cardinality of A is m, cardinality of B is n, now how many functions we can define from set A to set B? That will be n power m. That will be n power m. Why is that? You can very easily see, because for each element we have n choices. Okay, for example, for this element we have n choices. Similarly, for this element we have n choices, because whatever element you take, for that element we have total n choices. Okay, so that's why for each element we have n choices and we have total m elements, so n power m. These many functions we can create from set A to set B. Now he is asking, he has given us a set S2, and what is this set S2? This is set of all functions from this set to this set. Okay, so how many such functions we can create? Let's see. So he is saying that this S2 is basically set of all functions, okay, from set and so on n square minus 1 to set 0, 1, 2. Okay, so from this set, let's call it set A and let's call it set B. So from set A to set B, how many functions you can create? Okay, you can see the cardinality of set B, that is basically, you can see 3. Okay, so cardinality of B is 3, and the cardinality of A, if you see, so what is the cardinality of A? The cardinality of A, because from 0 to n square minus 1, so the cardinality of A is n square. Now you have set A, set B. Okay, then how many functions I can create from set A to set B? That will be number of functions. So I can say cardinality of set 2, because what is set 2? So set 2 is set of all functions from set A to set B. So the cardinality of S2, that will be 3 power n square. Now you can see, we have set S1, we have set S2, and both have same cardinality. Set S1, set S2, both have same cardinality. Because set S1 and set 2 both have same cardinality, so what we can say, we can see this. Okay, this we have seen, that injective function is possible when m is less than equal to n. Surjective function is possible if and only if m is greater than equal to n, and bijective function is possible if and only if m is equal to n. So now we can see that S1 and S2 both have same cardinality. Okay, and hence I can say that there exists a surjective function. What I can say? Yes, I can say that set S1 and set S2. Remember, set S1 and set S2. We have seen that both have same cardinality. So there exists a surjection from S1 to S2. Yes, correct. Okay, surjective function is possible. Similarly, there does not exist a bijection. No, this is wrong, because bijection is also possible. There exists a bijection. Yes, there exists a bijection. There does not exist a injection. This is also wrong, because injection is also possible. You can see, because remember, S1 and S2, this set S1 and set S2 both have same cardinality. So from S1 to S2 or from S2 to S1, basically you surjection, bijection, injection, all the type of functions are possible. Okay, so this is how we can solve this question. Okay, so the answer will be option A, C. Okay, let's solve this question. This is a GATE 2021 set 2 question from propositional logic. One formula is given to us. Okay, so you can see this is a implication statement S1, and he is asking tautology, and basically, okay, he is asking whether this formula S1, whether this formula S, this is tautology, contradiction. So this type of question. Okay, let's solve this. So to solve this question, we have different methods. Okay, so let's see. So first we will solve this question by method 1. Let me do it. So method 1, what is method 1? You can see here in the option D, if you see this option D, he is saying the antecedent of S is logically equivalent to consequent of S. Okay, so let's see what is antecedent of S, what is consequent of S, and then we will solve this question. Okay, so let's see this now. So what we have S. Okay, and in this S is an implication statement. Okay, now for example, if you have implication statement alpha implies beta. Okay, whenever we have implication statement alpha implies beta, then this alpha, this is called antecedent. Okay, this is called antecedent, and this beta, this is called consequent. Okay, so in any implication statement, when you have alpha implies beta, this alpha, this is implying beta. Okay, then this alpha is called antecedent, and this beta, this is called consequent. Okay, now in the question he has given us set S, and what is set S in our question? You can see, you can notice this is our set S, where antecedent, you can see this is an implication statement because this is alpha, this implies beta, so this is beta. Okay, alpha implies beta, you can see. So this is an implication statement, and this alpha, this is our antecedent, and this beta, this is our consequent. Okay, so let's see what is this antecedent, that is P and Q implies R. So our antecedent of S, that is P and Q implies R. Okay, so this is our antecedent of S. Okay, what I am writing, I am basically writing antecedent of S. So I can call it, let me call it antecedent of S. Okay, AN means basically antecedent of S. So what is antecedent of S? That is P and Q implies R, you can see. Okay, now first let's solve this antecedent, then we will come back to consequent. So what is this antecedent? Now here you can apply a formula. In propositional logic, there is one very important formula that we have, that if you have this implication statement alpha implies beta. Okay, so when you have this alpha implies beta, this implication statement, this is equivalent to alpha negation plus beta. Okay, so this is a very important formula we have. You can very easily see this, because this, when this is true, this is implication statement alpha implies beta. When this is true when either alpha is false or beta is true. So I can say either alpha is false or beta is true. So this is a very important formula in propositional logic. Alpha implies beta, this is equivalent to alpha dash plus beta. Let's apply this. So when we apply this, then what we will get? We will get P and Q negation plus R, because remember this is our alpha and this is our beta. Okay, so we will get this this we will get. Okay, now here we can apply the De Morgan formula. What is the De Morgan formula? Let me write it in inside. So what is De Morgan formula? De Morgan formula says that if you have alpha and beta negation, then that is basically equivalent to, this is equivalent to alpha negation or beta negation. This is the De Morgan formula. This we can apply now. So what we will get? We will get P negation or Q negation plus R. Okay, so this we will get plus R. So this is our simplification, we have done simplification basically. This is our antecedent of S. Now let's focus on what is consequent of S. Okay, so now we will see what is, so this is our antecedent. Okay, let me put it here, and now let's see what is consequent of S. So what is consequent of S? You can see in this, consequent of S is P and Q implies R. Okay, so this consequent of S is P and Q implies R. This is our consequent. Okay, remember this is our consequent of S. Okay, so this is consequent of S. Let's again apply the same formula. This is again alpha implies beta, this alpha implies beta, so we can solve it. Okay, we can write it P and Q negation plus Q implies R. Okay, now again we can apply the De Morgan formula. So what we will get? We will get P negation or Q negation plus, this is implication statement. Again we can convert this, because Q implication R, we can write it Q dash plus R. Okay, now remember this plus and this plus is basically disjunction. Okay, so either we can write it plus or we can write it disjunction. So what I'm saying that either we can write it plus or we can write it disjunction, both are same. Okay, so that's why you can, what you can do, you can basically, I can write it P dash plus Q dash plus Q dash plus R. Okay, and what is Q dash plus Q dash? That is Q dash. So we get P dash plus Q dash plus R. So this is our consequent. You can notice that this is same as this. Okay, because this is our antecedent. What is our antecedent? This is P dash plus Q dash plus R. You can notice that our antecedent of S, that is exactly same as consequent of S. Okay, so this antecedent of S is equivalent to consequent of S. Both are equivalent. Okay, you can see both are equivalent, and hence you can say the option D is correct. Option D is saying the antecedent of S is logically equivalent to consequent of S. So this is true because both are logically equivalent. Okay, now next he is saying, so what we have seen, actually what we have seen, that in this formula S, you can see this antecedent, let's call it alpha. This alpha is antecedent and this beta is consequent. Both are logically equivalent. So we can basically, we have proven that alpha is basically equivalent to beta. And what is the definition of equivalent? The definition of equivalent is basically alpha is equivalent to beta, means alpha implies beta is tautology and beta implies alpha. Okay, so this alpha is equivalent to beta, this means, okay, when you have two formula alpha comma beta, they are equivalent. What it means? It means that alpha implies beta and beta implies alpha, means this is also true, this is also true. Okay, so this alpha implies beta, this is also true, and this beta implies alpha, this is also true. So I can say that this statement S means alpha implies beta, so this is true. True means tautology, so S is tautology. Okay, so answer will be A comma D. So this is method 1. This is one method to solve this question. We can also solve this same question, we can solve using a different method. Okay, so let's solve this question, okay, by a different method. Let's see. So now our statement S, if you see this statement S, what is this? This is saying P and Q implies R. Okay, this is our antecedent. Now this implies P and Q implies Q implies R. This is our statement S. Okay, in this statement S. So now let's see whether this statement S is tautology or not. Okay, so to solve this question, you should notice one thing, that when you have any statement alpha implies beta, so this is an implication statement, and this implication statement is always true, except only in one case. There is only one case in which this can be false, and what is that? Alpha is true, beta is false. So you can see that implication statement alpha implies beta, Okay, alpha implies beta. This statement is always true, except only in one case. This is the only case in which this implication statement can become false. Okay, so when alpha is true, beta is false, this is the only case which can make implication statement false. Okay, now let's see whether this case is possible or not, that we want to see. Okay, this case is possible or not. So what I will try to do, I will make this is our beta, you can see. Okay, this is our beta and this is our alpha. So what I will do, I will make this beta false. Then I will try to make this alpha true. If I can do this, okay, if I can make beta false, alpha true, if I can do this, what it means? It means that I can make this statement as false. Okay, so this statement as is not a tautology. So this is the basic idea. Now let's solve this. Okay, so now let's solve it. So what I will do, first I will make this beta equal to false. Okay, so make beta equal to false. And what is this beta? This beta is basically, you can see, this is your beta. So how to make it false? This beta is an implication statement, and how to make it false? If I want to make it false, then I have to make it true and I have to make it false. Okay, so I need to make it true and I need to make it false. How can I make it true? So you can see this is P and Q. I want to make it true, and to make it true there is only one way. If you want to make it true, P and Q, if you want to make it true, there is only one way. What is that? You have to make P equal to true and you have to make Q equal to true. This is the only way. Okay, next I want to make this false. Okay, Q implies R. I want to make it false. Okay, so what I want to do, Q implies R. I want to make it false. If I want to make it false, you can see, then there is only one way. And what is that? I have to make Q equal to true and I have to make R equal to false. This is the only way. Okay, this is an implication statement. Q implies R. If I want to make it false, there is only one way. What is that? Q should be true and R should be false. So now what I have done, I have made beta equal to false. Okay, after making beta equal to false, what I will do, I will try to make alpha equal to true. I will try to do this. Okay, so let's see. You can see P is already true, Q is already true. So this P and Q, this is true, implies R. What is R? You can see R is false. Okay, so R is false. True implies false. Okay, you can see R is false. Okay, R is false. So true implies false, and this true implies false means false. So you can see this alpha has become false. What it means? It means that if beta is false, okay, if beta is false, then I cannot make alpha true. Okay, if beta is false, then alpha will be false. If beta is false, then alpha cannot be true. It means that this implication statement can never become false, because to make this implication statement false, this formula S, to make this formula S false, there is only one way. What is that? I have to make alpha true and beta false. But you can see this possibility is not there. We have proven that if beta is false, then alpha cannot be true. Okay, so what it means? It means that S is never false. Never false means always true. So this formula S, this is always true, hence this S is tautology. So this is another method to solve this question. Okay, now so this is how you can solve it. And whenever they give you an implication statement, whenever they give you a statement like this, alpha implies beta, whenever they give you this type of statement, then what you can do, all you need to do is just check whether you can make it false or not. Okay, basically check whether you can make it true and you can make it false. Can you do this? If you can do this, okay, if you can do this, alpha is true, beta is false, if you can do this, then this G is not a tautology. And if you cannot do this, then it means G is a tautology. So this concept also you can apply. Okay, so this question we have seen by two different methods, and the answer will be option A, D. Okay.